You're listening to The Broken Meeple Show, a podcast that speaks passionately about board games for the benefit of those who play them. My name's Luke Hector, best known for the Broken Meeple YouTube channel, and I'm an everyday gamer just like you. And I'll be talking about reviews, top 10s, and just about anything that connects me to board games. As long as I have a tea or coffee in hand, that is. So grab a cup, relax, and enjoy. And remember, it's only a game. Hey folks, yes, it is Luke Hector with my mug of tea in hand as promised, in this case supported by peppermint tea. Yeah, some of you are going to be wondering what on earth is going on here. Well, basically, I have refreshed the podcast for you all, so this is episode 0. So half of you who know what this channel is about are probably thinking, hang on a minute, what's he doing? And the other half of you who are new to this podcast are probably also thinking, okay, what are you on? So I'm basically confusing 100% of my audience. Basically, this podcast has been going on for a good few years now, but I've always been thinking it needs a refresh. It needed streamlining, it needed to be consistent, and when I recently passed 10,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel, I decided that it was time to essentially, branch out and try and find a way to do something different with the podcast. And so this is kind of like a starting introduction episode for those of you who are new or old to the channel, to say who I am, what I do, what I'm planning to do, and hopefully you'll be along for the ride. And, hopefully I want as many people along for the ride as possible, but this is done just as a hobby. It is not my full-time job, so this is always a learning curve for me. And the podcast has been good for the years I've been doing it, but it's now time to really focus and get it into a really good quality podcast alongside my YouTube channel as well. So who am I? Well, my name's Luke Hector. I'm with the Broken Meeple Show. And it's just me, no other team, just me doing this by my lonesome. I essentially started the Broken Meeple about 7 years ago as a written blog, and then I moved on to YouTube about 5 years ago. And when I was doing reviews then, I was like barely any subscribers, no support. Nowadays, I have a small Patreon group who support me through donations. I have some support through a couple of publishers and Asmodee distributors, but not a ton, certainly not like the big leagues. And I've got video reviews and podcasts and various other content coming out as well. So it has grown, and it certainly is like in a really cool place, but I want it to get bigger. I want it to be more than it is, and that involves putting it a bit more quality. So what's the deal with this whole new podcast format to warrant an episode 0? Well, if you listen to my podcast in previous years, you'll notice a big change fairly frequently in the quality, in audio, songs, content, the works. And it goes up and down. It's a bit of a roller coaster, but I'm keeping my old episodes on the feed, so you will be able to check them out if you so wish. But for those of you brand new, you could always just start at this episode and then we'll be along for the ride. So what's changed? Well, firstly, hello, you can see me, all you out there in video YouTube land. Yes, previously I used to air just this on audio. Then I put a video on YouTube under request, but it was just a screenshot. It was literally just a thumbnail. Now, with the use of OBS, Open Broadcaster software, I can actually basically give you a video. And of course, it's a podcast. Most of you are listening to this just in your earphones on a commute. But some of you may be watching on YouTube, and occasionally I will show things on the video that you won't be able to see, obviously, if you're listening to it by audio. But I will describe what's going on. It won't be a case that you'll be missing out on content if you're not watching this. Just consider this maybe like the deluxe version of the episode. It's not a mandatory requirement, though. It will just, different audiences will get different things out of this format. But what I'll also be able to do is share my browser on the screen and other things. So I'll be able to transition to my browser, Google Chrome, where I can go onto different sites and showcase what it is I'm talking about for the benefits of anyone who happens to be watching this. And there are some episodes I'm considering in the future where that will be somewhat useful. On top of that, it's still just me speaking, but there will be occasions where I'll get guests on, do like Skype conversations, Zoom, that kind of thing. And, hopefully they will work as well. But what I'm going to do primarily in this new format is make it consistent. I can't be more apologetic to people in the past where I've always said, I'm going to do this at least twice a month. Yeah, that didn't work. okay, I'm going to do this once a month. We'll just do once a month. That'll be okay. That didn't work out either. Yeah, so it really wasn't consistent, and that's not good for a podcast. You need to be consistent. So this is a 95% promise that I will be doing this podcast once a week without fail, unless there's like a holiday I'm on or something and I haven't got stuff in advance, but I will tell you in advance if there is ever such a vacation that I end up on. Not that I'm usually away for that greater length of time if it's not a convention. But it will be released once a week, and I'm aiming to make it a Sunday release. So those of you who want to relax on the weekend with me can do so. Those of you who want to have something in preparation for your horrible Monday morning commute, then you've got something there as well. But every Sunday, I hope to release the episode, and there's no specific time, like 10 o'clock or 6 o'clock. Everybody's got different time zones. It will just be a case of on Sunday, it will come out. That's the best I can really do. Now, on top of that, where are you going to find it? Well, there's several platforms you'll be able to get this on. I am now on Apple Podcasts, so you will be able to find me on there. In fact, let me showcase for you that entirely, actually. So you'll be able to see Apple Podcasts, The Broken Meeple, still has my old logo on it. I will get that changed momentarily, but so all my old episodes are on there, and, some people have been very kindly left a review on there. I'll be pleading for that by the end of the episode, believe me. You can also check me out on Spotify, where I now have the podcast recently uploaded to. It wasn't there before, but I have now managed to finally get it approved, and so you can find everything on there from old feeds to the new stuff as it comes out. And then finally, if you want to go direct, I have an RSS feed, which you'll be able to find in the link in the description of the YouTube version. But I am hosted on soundcloud.com. So that is where the official podcast is hosted. I do need to change the banner on the screen. I'm well aware of this. But that's where the original hosting is done. And so if you check out the YouTube video, you'll be able to find the link in the description for the RSS feed. You'll be able to get it on whatever platform it is you're using. I don't know, is it Splitter, Podcast Addict? I forget the names of these. There are so many of these podcasting platforms now. Pretty much pick your poison, search for The Broken Meeple, and hopefully you'll find it. If you do struggle to find it though, then by all means get in touch with me by various platforms, which I'll show you a bit later, and just let me know that you're struggling and I will give you the RSS feed. So don't worry about that. So with that in mind, a weekly podcast of roughly about 30 minutes. I'm going to chop and change that occasionally depending on the content, but I want to stay around the 30-minute mark. It's okay if it goes a bit under the 25, and it's fine if it goes above to about 40 tops, but I don't want it to go any more than 40, because I feel that in the past I've gone way too long with the podcast, like 60 minutes plus, and sometimes some people do like it, but I did a poll and asked the audience, what kind of length do you like for your podcast? The vast majority voted for 30 minutes or 45 minutes, mostly the 30. Very few went for the 60-minute plus, and only a bit more went for bite-sized 15 minutes. 15 minutes I'd kind of struggle with. I mean, we're already up to 8.5 minutes now, so how exactly am I supposed to do 15 minutes on a full topic? But certainly I'm going to aim for 30 minutes, 40 minutes tops, and if that means I have to split an episode into several parts, then so be it. There's a podcast coming soon, which I'll mention in a bit, that is definitely going to warrant a 2-episode split, because I just do not want to do the full episode in one go. As much as people voted on the alternative, I'm kind of like, no, this needs to be a 2-parter. So what content am I going to do? So in the past, it was kind of random when I did content. And that's kind of the way it is as well. Although what I hope to do is that at the end of an episode, I'll be able to give you a taster of what I'm going to do in the next episode. So that I will plan ahead what I'm doing, and you'll be able to kind of get a teaser going, ooh, next episode he gets to do this. But it's not going to be quite like, next time on Dragon Ball Z. It's like, no, it's just like, this is the plan. I'll have, say, 3 or 4 episodes planned in advance, and then at least you'll be able to get an idea. But what am I going to do? So reviews and top 10 lists, or top 5, top 3, it depends on the content. But normally I do these on YouTube, and I still will. They're still going to be on YouTube, so don't think that they're going to suddenly disappear. But I need to watch how often I put videos out, because 1, I'm upping the quality of the videos, so it's going to take more time to edit. But also, I run the risk of hitting burnout if I'm not careful, because videos take a long time to edit. You think a podcast takes a long time to edit, videos are even worse. And I can't always fit the time in, especially when we get to like Gen Con and Essen seasons, these big conventions, and it just becomes so hard to get them out. So I need to be careful, because the videos are going to be like once a week frequency if I can help it. So one podcast a week, one video a week, I need to be able to fit the content in. So some reviews and top 5, top 10 lists are going to move on to the podcast to spread it out a bit. But what I'll probably do is I will save like the new releases, the really big hotness for video, and probably some of the more interesting, like more, shall we say, more sought after top 10 lists would go on the video one. And then this podcast can be the more obscure top 10 lists that probably won't get as many views on YouTube, but will still get talked about, so I can still at least do it for content. On top of that, I will talk about what games I've played. So, just indicators of, at the Monday Board Game Club, I took these games along. Why did I take these games along? Because X, Y, and Z. And then I played this game, and then this is what happened, and this is what I thought of the experience. So you'll get an idea just from my own personal life as to how I do with some of these games. On top of that, an old segment I intend to bring back that I used to do in the recent season 4 is movers and shakers. Now, I'm not going to do these like musical intros and outros to all the different sections like I used to, because it was a bit too much hassle, and frankly, they were quite cheesy when I was doing them. I think most people just prefer me to go, look, here you are, talk. Just talk. It's a podcast. That is what you do. You don't sing to me, you talk. So I'm going to stick with that. Not to mention, it was a bit hard in the editing room to kind of get the volume right on those musical tracks, because you kind of hear me talking, this is good, and I'll see you on the next outro, and then suddenly, like the music intro would be too loud because it's hard to gauge. So it's not something that you'll have to worry too much about anymore. But the movers and shakers will be talking about games that have shifted in the rankings or shifted in and out of the collection. So as a new game in the collection, why? Why do I want it in the collection? Why is a game suddenly fallen off my shelf? Not literally. And why has a game suddenly gone from ranking 9 to ranking 6? What changed? There's going to be times when I talk about that, and that has been heavily requested by you, so it's something I'm going to do. And then I'll do odds and sods here and there. I mean, I mentioned guests. I will occasionally aim to do some Skype or Zoom meeting conversations with, say, a one-on-one guest, 2 max maybe. I'm still a bit new on this. And I already have one set up in the future. So as a little teaser, you will get a podcast between myself and Jeremy Howard from Man vs. Meeple. So that was a barrel of laughs. But that's the one that's going to have to be a 2-parter, because we talked for about 90 minutes straight. It was kind of ridiculous, and I don't want to cut half the content out. It was really good. We talked about everything from games to relationships to different publishers to what we like in games, all sorts of different topics. So, guests will be every now and again. And I want to try and, I'll talk to anybody about board games, to be honest, but I'd like to get in some of the smaller people as well, some of the smaller creators. Because every time you see people out there, it's like, and we've got this special guest on, and it's the same guest you've seen on 5 other podcasts, and they're not even necessarily anything to do with board games. They might just be an entertainer. And it's like, no, come on. There's a lot of content creators out there for board games that don't get enough buzz, and I feel this would be a good way to talk to them and get an idea. Kickstarter, I don't tend to talk about Kickstarter that much. I do pledge on Kickstarter, but the podcast won't be a focus for that. But occasionally, for 5 minutes, I'll say, I pledged on this game. This is how much I pledged. This is what I'm going for, extras-wise. Why am I doing it? Why did this game entice me? So, you'll get something out of that. But I don't tend to do Kickstarters, and I'm certainly not a fan of doing Kickstarter previews either. Conventions, that'll be another one. So what I want to do on that is, if I've been to a convention, I can give my view as to how it went. So, talk about that for 30 minutes. In fact, a future episode, possibly next week's episode, will be a talk about GridCon. GridCon I attended over last weekend, and it was a virtual convention because, as I record this, as you can tell by my grizzly hair, we're in the middle of COVID isolation still in the UK, so my hair is a complete mess until next Monday when I get it cut. Yay! I get it cut soon. I can't wait. But, it's going to be a load off my mind, like literally and figuratively. But In looking forward, wait a minute, what am I talking about here? I'm supposed to be talking about games. No, but GridCon, I'll be talking about how I did, what games I taught, and my views on virtual conventions as a whole. So that'll be an interesting episode, I think. On top of that, I think other content I've got, as I look at my notes, there's one segment I want to do in the future, which is I'm going to go through the Board Game Geek Top 100. And so I will effectively be going through the whole top 100 and explaining what I think about the games. Should they be that high? Are they overrated, underrated? I've played at least 90% of the games on that list, possibly even 95% plus. So I reckon I can talk about quite a lot of them. And certainly there's quite a few on there that I would deem overrated. So maybe that will be a good episode or two to go through that. In fact, it probably will have to be a couple of episodes because it's 100 games. I got to talk about them fairly quickly. And of course, in every episode, you will get me supported by a cup of tea or coffee because, frankly, that's kind of what the intro to the podcast said. I like to talk about games, preferably with a tea or coffee in hand. So, as some of you can see, I've got the old logo mug that I got as a cheap extra when I did some printing, and mint tea for my drink. So, there you go. Nice sip of mint tea. So there'll be all sorts of teas and even some extra coffees. And to be honest, if you've got like a board game memorabilia mug or some themed tea and coffee or something that you want to send me, then by all means get in touch and I'll just put it on a podcast episode and just show it off. It'd just be interesting. Call it maybe like a running joke that I've always got a tea or coffee in hand and I try to mix it up as much as possible. So, I like my tea and coffee. What can I say? As long as it's now decaf or caffeine free, because I've kind of gone down that route lately. Mainly because I think I was practically overdosing on the stuff in the past. So, with that said, the podcast is going to change, hopefully for the better. Hopefully most of you will enjoy the changes that are going to be made. But if you want to know more about me and more about what I do as well as the podcast, then here's a few ways you can get into contact with me as I go back to my browser. Don't worry, I'm going to explain what's going on so those of you in audio world will get an idea. So on Facebook, if you search for The Broken Meeple, or at The Broken Meeple, you will find me on Facebook. And the cover page, I think actually could be an episode in itself, because that photo that's on there is very old. That's like when probably a year after I moved into my new house, and I can see several games on there that are no longer in my collection. So maybe it's a good episode to talk about why they're no longer in the collection, because there's quite a few down there, I must admit. So, if you want to see that, then I'll certainly consider it. Now, as I look in other, pages, you can also find me on Twitter, at The Broken Meeple. And by searching at The Broken Meeple, you will find me with a sort of less than flattering photo, but also a cover picture of a Carcassonne map, which I need to change as well, because that's a bit old, a bit low res, and I'm not quite as keen on leaving that there. But on Twitter and Facebook, I basically post content update and random musings, really. Twitter especially. If you want to get hold of me nice and quickly, I recommend Twitter as the way to do it, because it's just a direct message. I will get flagged on my phone instantly, whereas Facebook's a little bit weird on getting messages directly to me. But, I'm posting weird stuff on here, like, what did I do? I mentioned, problems with the first recording of this podcast, because I recorded it. This is the second time I'm doing it, because accidentally I recorded the first one through OBS, and I found out at the last minute that OBS records audio at a much lower quality than Audition, which I'm using now. But there's other things there, like I've got Targi, and I've got into the top 100 game blogs list, and here's more stuff on Targi. My haircut that I'm getting next week with a big smiley face on the calendar. My review of Star Wars Rebels. I don't just love board games. I like anything geekdom. I like movies. I like cinema. I like video games. And occasionally I'll watch something and I'll just give a random written article on it. Nothing huge, just my thoughts after doing it. And recently I watched all 4 seasons of Star Wars Rebels after watching all 7 seasons of the Clone Wars. And each one I gave a verdict in what I thought of it. So, they're just interesting little bits on the side. And to be fair, if you want me to do stuff on the podcast or on video that's not board game related, I'll have to see if that's wise to do when this is a board game channel at the end of the day. But if it's wanted by the fans or the Patreons, I'll consider it. So Twitter is a good way. The YouTube channel itself, you will find it just by searching for The Broken Meeple on YouTube. The cover photo is actually correct this time. I did it recently via Snapper, which is hopefully going to sort out all the rest of the banners and thumbnails that I do. But these are an old format of thumbnail because I'm changing those as well, a new style going forward. But you can see Broken Meeple, 10K subscribers, and recently I did a shelf-by-shelf playlist list. I did like daily content through April and May and part of June as part of getting people through isolation. And the shelf-by-shelf is basically, whoop, nearly set that going. I don't want to set the videos off. But it's essentially shelf-by-shelf, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 50. Yeah, I did 50 videos on my whole collection. So you can see all the games in my collection, shelf by shelf. I talk about each one and why it's in the collection. It's quite a big set of videos, but it was popular and people enjoyed it, and I'm glad they did. It was hard work to do. I nearly hit burnout, but people loved it, and I don't need to do it for a long time because I don't think my collection is going to update that fast. So, hopefully it's a good list. But if you go through my videos in general, you will see top 10s, you'll see digital plays, you'll see podcasts from previous times, reviews, both extended, both short, and just all sorts. I mean, lately you'll see mostly shelf by shelf, but in previous ones you'll see the odd preview, some board game insert work, more reviews, more podcasts. It's quite a substantial list of videos, and you will notice the quality shifts from season to season as I experiment with new cameras, new audio, new footage, new everything. So it's quite a mission. And finally, if you want to check out my hub for everything, you can go to brokenmeeple.blogspot.com, and this is my hub page on Blogger. It's not really any way to communicate with me, it's just a simple page that houses everything. So I need to figure out why the cover photo keeps going really small. Blogger is not the most intuitive software in the world, but hopefully I'll fix that. But it's basically got all my videos on there shared. It's got an archive of all my posts, some recent plays, some snippets of my collection, my Twitter feed, my Facebook, Facebook post, link me on Facebook, etc. The member of the Dice Tower Network reminder. So it's basically just a hub. So if you want an easy way to see everything I'm doing, then brokenmeeple.blogspot.com is a good way of doing it. Now, you'll notice at the top there's a Patreon as well. Well, that's because I do have a Patreon for this channel. And with this Patreon, if I go to the public page, you will see that it's on small screen at the moment because I'm using this on the shit half a screen here. But it will have my new cover, and there are various membership levels starting at as little as $1 a month to $2 to $5 to $10 a month, to help support the channel. And through these tiers, you'll be able to get early access to some of the videos I do. You'll be able to submit Q&As either on live streams or on podcasts. You'll be able to suggest top 10 lists for me to do and vote on your Patreon choice for me to talk about. You'll be able to get shout outs in the podcast and the videos. You'll also be able to request a game with me at a convention. I mean, to be honest, if you find me at a convention, you can play a game with me, as long as I'm not busy. But, with that particular level in the Patreon, you'll be able to specifically request a game with me. We'll be able to pick a game together and we'll arrange it. We will book it and we will ensure that we do it. It won't just be on the fly. And there's other tiers there as well. I might give these a bit of a rejig at some point for value and what benefits they do. But essentially, this is just a good way to support the channel and to help keep this going. Because at the moment, the Patreon pays for overheads like Adobe Creative Cloud, all the software like Audition and Premiere Pro. It pays for hosting the podcast, that costs money. It pays for Snapper, which is a subscription fee. It pays for Motion Array, which is a source of stock footage and videos and music. That requires an annual subscription. There's all sorts of things that the Patreon pays for. And then there's a little bit that I get after that to go towards hardware. So this boom stand, for instance, this microphone, the Logitech Streamcam that's doing this video, the light that's not getting rid of the shadow on my left side. It's all of this stuff is chipped into with Patreon, but mostly paid through out of my own pocket. And the more support I can get via Patreon, the more I can experiment with the hardware and try new things. So honestly, you're not forced to do it. I just really, really appreciate everybody who does. So, yeah, that's essentially the podcast in a nutshell. The Broken Meeple Show, as it will now be called. It was just called the Broken Meeple Podcast, I think, before, or just the Broken Meeple. Now it is officially the Broken Meeple Show. And hopefully you guys are excited for the new content that I'm going to be doing for it. Hopefully you will be appreciative of the weekly format on a Sunday. You know, this will be my way of apologizing for not doing a good job of that in the past. So, call it my apology to you. And with all the platforms that you can find me on, all the ways to contact me, hopefully we'll be able to get in touch on a more personal level, particularly through live streaming, which I hope to do at some point very soon, where using this OBS software that I've got, I'll be able to host YouTube live streams for Q&As, and if I get really good with it, maybe the occasional solo play. The problem is it takes a very specific setup to do solo plays, and some people who do it have got overhead cameras and everything, and I don't have anything like that here. So we'll have to see how that goes. But certainly to do some live streams, Q&As, talk, just get in touch with you, to do things. Maybe actually do some live stream on gaming. I mean, this is a gaming laptop, so there's nothing saying that I couldn't play something on Board Game Arena, Tabletop Simulator, Tabletopia, or even a video game of some description. Maybe play like the Mystic Vale on Steam, for example, and play stuff like that on a live stream. Maybe I can do that. Who knows? The world is my oyster when it comes to experimenting with this laptop setup. So, as we get on to the whole 27 minutes, I think this is a good time to wrap up. So thank you for listening to the Broken Meeple Show podcast episode 0. And I'm glad that some of you are sticking around. I hope to draw some of you new people in. If you like what you hear, then please leave a review for the podcast in whatever platform you're using. I'd be most appreciative, and share the content wherever possible. If you can, subscribe to the Patreon, but of course, feel free to check out the rest of my content first before making a decision like that, because after all, you've got to say that I deserve the support. It's up to me to make you realize this is content that you want to listen to. So, without further ado, I'm going to head off. And remember, as always, I have a catchphrase that everybody who knows me already knows it. But for those of you who are new, remember, it's only a game. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple Show.